And 4 years ago, our beloved Dr. Wesley G. Robinson McNeese was behind this podium with his call to action. This has been an event that I have attended over 14 years with my 3 daughters, with the members of the Divine Nine, with my SIU colleagues. And this event was the first time when I walked in, I saw the power of my community. This historic event has spanned 49 years, and I hope that in 100 years, these gold coats that we see will still be descending on this hotel ballroom. Frontiers have a place that has invested in our youth, especially our boys. I want everybody in the room below the age of 18 to stand up for a second. Below the age of 18 to stand up. I want you to know that we hear you, we see you, and we are here to help you keep your dreams. So I'm an academic physician. I'm used to presenting with PowerPoint, so y'all have really stretched me today. So one of the things you all are going to get today is my authentic self.
Yeah.
As a physician, sometimes we don't get to be our authentic selves. So there are under 20 schools that are medical schools that actually have the Department of Medical Humanities in it. SIU School of Medicine happens to be one of those. We have been practicing what we call narrative medicine. We believe in storytelling. We believe that storytelling allows us to make the invisible visible. It gives us an opportunity to be more proximate. We talk a lot about the power of vicarious trauma, but it's within storytelling that we allow to really mirror vicarious trauma, but also vicarious resiliency. So today I'm going to share some of my stories. I'm a child raised on Langston Hughes' Dreamkeeper. Maya Angelou, who said, when people show you who they are the first time, you better believe them. She also said that when you know better, you do better. And Nikki Giovanni, whose dream was to discover something that no one else had. So she decided to become a poet and put things together in different ways that no one else had. So in my preparation, I learned that Dr. Martin Luther King actually was friends with Langston Hughes. They were really close friends. Langston Hughes actually wrote his last letter to Dr. Martin Luther King before he died. I wonder if this served as inspiration. You all remember the poem, The Dreamkeeper. I wonder if it had anything to do with Dr. Martin Luther King's dream. So one of the things I think about dream keepers, the initials are DK. I believe that there are 2 types of DKs in this world. Are you all ready?
Yeah.
Ma'am.
The 2 types of DKs are the dream keepers and the dream killers. There are 2 types of organizations in this world, the dream keepers and the dream killers. There are 2 types of parents in this world, the dream keepers and the dream killers. There are 2 types of bosses in this world,
All right.
the dream keepers and the dream killers. And last but not least, there are 2 types of cities in this world. Those that help their citizens keep their dreams and those that let the dreams die. And unfortunately, sometimes dreams die in 3rd grade.
Come on now.
So as a physician, we talk a lot about heart disease being a silent killer. But I also believe that illiteracy is a silent killer too. So I want to share my positionality because it shapes the lens in the world and how I actually see it. So yes, I'm a family physician. I'm also an academic strategist. I'm the Associate Dean of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I am tired. So my invisible identities are that I'm a mother to 3 daughters. You all heard that I call them my earth, wind, and fire. I wanted them always to be acknowledged and to know that they were important. But to be honest, I did this out of fear. I didn't really want people people to know their name is because I wanted to always protect them. But I'm not afraid anymore. Samira, Ariana, and Yasmin. I do not welcome you. I'm a single mother who has received profound support from my significant other, Wendi Wilson, his son, Quentin, my sorors, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, my friends, my church, and the Springfield community. But you know what? My children have actually been my greatest teachers. I'm a daughter of a physician who always saw every single patient regardless of whether or not they could pay. I'm the daughter of a teacher who believed that every child had potential and was willing to protect that potential. I'm the granddaughter of a woman who actually delivered babies. No, she was not trained, but nobody else was there to deliver the Black babies. I'm a graduate of Hampton University and HBCU, a historically Black college and university. And my first paper was actually about Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was the youngest child of 20 children. And she coined the term that said, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Y'all like that one? But you know what? I now understand as a physician why she said this after being beaten for trying to vote. After receiving what we call the Mississippi appendectomy. That's a hysterectomy without her permission. She was speaking of the health impact of racism. She understood why our CDC last year declared that racism is a public health threat. Her favorite song was This Little Light of Mine. That's my favorite song too. That got me through medical school. But I want to remind you all that every single person in here has a light. And you have no choice but to let it shine. I remind myself all the time of the most important question that I've ever heard. And that is, Dr. McNeese really liked this one. Who were you before the world told you who you were supposed to be? I try to fight against not making fear my compass. And this is why I must protect Black history. Because Black history is our history. And this is why we must teach it. So today I'm going to be a little vulnerable and I'm going to share a couple of pivotal stories in my life that have driven my work here at SIU as a physician committed to health disparities. You move through the world a little bit different when you become a mom. You become a fierce protector of your children and of others' children, so that when you're not here, the world is still loving on them. So story number one. Are you all ready?
Yeah.
People don't know about these stories, but there's no PowerPoint, so here you go. In the 4th grade, I moved from a predominantly Black neighborhood to a predominantly white neighborhood. One day at school, I was drinking out the water fountain. And I guess I was drinking out a little too long. And I was called the N-word for the first time by John. I didn't even know what the N-word meant, but I knew it was not my name. So I looked up and I hit him. So yes, I got in a little bit of trouble. When I went home, I asked my mom what the N-word was, and she taught me my first critical lesson of always standing in my integrity, even around people who aren't for me. She said, you must forgive him. She said, Wendy, this is a learned behavior. He knows not what he does. He is just as good as you. Not you're just as good as him. I later learned his mother was very ill. I understand now that hurt people hurt people. Yeah. She taught and commanded me, Bettina Wills, to search for the humanity and the potential in people, even the ones that were not for me. She said, you will love your enemy. And that's a lesson that I'm still working on. I'm still trying to embrace that. She did not know that I hit him until I told her about this speech. So I want to thank my mother, Rosa Parks Strength here, for being my dream keeper. I also want to thank so many people in this room that have been my dream keeper. I'm an optimist, but I'm an optimist because if not, the world would probably crush my soul. So I try to have faith, and I have a deep-rooted belief in the potential of people. When I first moved here, I saw things happening with my children when I got them off the school bus, and I realized that I needed to be the one to get them off the school bus. I needed to be there to help them understand who and whose they were. I needed to protect their mind, body, and spirit. I needed to be their dream keeper. So I decided to push pause and become a stay-at-home mom. There were some who thought something had happened to me. Some people supported me, and others who encouraged me to take leadership roles in the community, and that's why I'm on so many boards. Because the Blackwell said, you need to know about the Community Foundation for the Land of Lincoln. You need to know about the YMCA. You need to know about the Boys and Girls Club. And so I was obedient to what was given to me. So we must support the organizations that support our youth. So one day I was preparing for a health fair as a stay-at-home mom, and I put on a white coat. And my daughter Yasmin said, why are you putting on a white coat? And I said, what do you mean? She said, doctors wear white coats. I said, I'm a doctor. Lesson number one, always be your authentic self and make sure that your children know your full truth. And build environments that help you stand in your full truth. And when I moved here, I actually didn't have a whole lot of faith because I really wasn't sure what Springfield was about. I did not believe that there was a workplace that I could actually be a single mom, a woman leader, and a physician. I returned to work fortunately, and Dr. Cruz was the dean. Dr. McNeese was boldly leading up equity, diversity, and inclusion. I got back up on the ramp at SIU School of Medicine, and they proved me wrong. It was a place willing to be innovative, supportive, creative. I applied for the position as Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Dean, and Dr. Cruz declared that we would be an anti-racist institution. And all of this was before George Floyd. Dr. Mahoney, our president, declared that SIU would be an anti-racist institution, and we would fight all forms of oppression. So what does it mean to be an anti-racist institution? It means that we're going to be committed, that we're going to collaborate, we're going to demand crucial conversations, and we're going to ask the hard questions and be transparent. We're going to let other people lead, we're going to be accountable to them. We're going to examine our history because we're not perfect. We're going to invest in unlocking potential. Being an anti-racist means that we're co-creating opportunities for learning and growth. It also says that we will re-envision our relationship with our community, but we're also going to re-envision our relationship with ourselves. Story number 3. I'm the type of mom at the dinner table my oldest said to me in 4th grade, "Mom, who is the KKK?" I said, "Where did you get that from?" She said, "Well, they were teaching us about Black history." Being a first-time mom, I could not understand why there wasn't a note that came home to tell me that they were going to be talking about such serious topics. But also being the daughter of a mother where the KKK drove past her house every single Sunday, I had some vicarious trauma. So my 3 daughters and I, we were packed up in the car the next day, driving to the Martin Luther King Monument, 14 hours. I wanted to make sure that my children did not learn Black history from a place of fear, but from a place of strength. That same town is now at Howard University. Now I'm 3 miles away from that monument, studying political science, aspiring to be a lawyer. Samira, go ahead and wave your hand. So we know and very familiar with the trauma response or fight or flight, but the ones that people rarely talk about are freeze and submit. Now you heard that my natural response in 4th grade was apparently to fight. Sometimes when I'm in shock with the things that I see and the things I hear about, I actually freeze. And this actually gives me compassion and understanding for people when they come in telling their stories, and they're traumatized not by what they saw, but they're traumatized because they witnessed something and they didn't do anything about it because they froze. And that's why we must practice what to do when we see something that's wrong. We need to practice what to say. We need to practice what we're going to do. Because the most painful thing for people when they come into our equity support team is all of this happened in front of somebody and nobody said anything at all. Story 4. When I came through high school, the history books, the old history books only taught us that we were slaves. So in my mind, to try to escape, I tried to say to myself, who would I have been if I was back in slavery? So of course, I picked Harriet Tubman. Me and Harriet Tubman got really, really close to the point that when I was at University of Virginia, I saw no other black women physicians like me. So I carried a picture on a card of Harriet Tubman in my white coat pocket. Then one day I saw another African-American woman physician and I took that and she was having a really hard day in the elevator and I just slipped it in her pocket. And we started slipping it back and forth to each other whenever we saw each other. The reason why I liked Harriet Tubman is that she said, when you hear the dogs barking, keep running. She also said, I have freed a whole lot of slaves. I would have freed even more if they knew they were slaves. So as a physician, one of the things I say is that I have healed a whole lot of people, but I would have healed so many more if they just knew they were sick. Most people with hypertension don't know they have hypertension. Most people with diabetes don't even know they have diabetes. So this is my last story. Dr. Martin Luther King Day was declared in 1983. My private school, let me preface things, our mascot was actually a Confederate soldier, so you know where I'm going with this. Was not going to give us the day off, so I protested and did not go. That was in 1983. That was the day I realized that I could free myself. I have never worked or gone to school on Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I am donating my honorarium back to these boys in the corner because I don't want to get paid because I am not working on Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I also had a petition signed and turned it into my headmaster then. Black history is American history, and it's important. Back in the day, in those history books, they only taught us that our contribution were as slaves. Thank God I had parents that taught me otherwise. Those lessons ingrained in us as children sometimes show up as adults. So sometimes I found myself as an adult sitting in meetings, asking myself, who would this person next to me have been in slavery? Would they have helped me on the Underground Railroad? Would they have sold me from my mother? But later on I realized that I didn't have the language. I was looking for my allies. I do not teach my daughters that they were runaways. I teach them that they are freedom seekers. Did you know that there was actually a medical diagnosis called Dracomania? Do you know what Dracomania is? That's what they called the runaway slaves. There was a diagnosis for something that was natural to want to be free. And that's why we have to make sure that we do not pathologize what is normal. So the medical field, we have been working hard, trying to eliminate bias. We have been working hard to reduce systemic barriers. The American Medical Association recently came out with a document called Advancing Health Equity. And one of the things it says is that science has advanced and evolved, so must language and understanding. I love that we are developing person-centered language because language is important. It provides people the inherent respect for their humanity and dignity. So slaves, no. we were enslaved. Homeless are not homeless, they are unhoused. Incarcerated people or felons are not, they are justice-involved people. During COVID, it was illuminated that it was not race, but racism that was a driver for these disparities that we saw. It was the zip codes that people were living in. It was the jobs that they worked and what they had access to. So I want you all to remember that the narrative is very important. Don't forget that we were freedom seekers. We must humanize people. It is critical to see people outside of their roles for your success. So my litmus test, I always say, is do you know who takes out your trash? Do you know their names? Because if you don't, you really haven't been seeing people. So Dr. Martin Luther King, he is known as a drum major for peace. And if we let it, we could fall in that trap of seeing him as somebody that was bigger than life. So I don't want us to think about him being bigger than life. This was an ordinary man doing extraordinary things. So let's humanize him for a minute. Dr. Martin Luther King, he was a father of 4. He was a husband. We know that he was shot and killed at 39, but did you know his daughter, his oldest daughter, was actually washing dishes at the age of 12 when she found out that her father was shot? See, we only talk about the singular. We have to think about the ripple effect of some of the violence that we have in the communities. His youngest was 5 years old. His brother was actually in the hotel room underneath him. This was a smart man. He actually skipped the 9th and the 12th grade. He had a PhD by the age of 25. We know about him writing letters from Birmingham jail, but do you know that this man was actually incarcerated 29 times? One time for driving 5 miles per hour above the speed limit. So for my athletes, this man was the quarterback. He was a football player. He was a basketball player. And he actually, for my first responders back there, he wanted to be a fireman. So he actually understood the importance of the urgency of now. And he always wanted to rescue people. Did you know that his mother grieved him, but 6 years later, she was actually shot at the Ebenezer Baptist Church while she was playing piano. So as a physician, I became very curious about the question, what was the environment that actually made a man like Dr. Martin Luther King? This is what we need to analyze. So there's something called the Childhood Opportunity Index. I'm going to say that again, the Childhood Opportunity Index. This is something that maps out the quality of life in the neighborhoods in our community. The people who developed it actually believed that every child had potential and deserved an equal opportunity to grow and learn. Neighborhoods matter. They talk about the geography of childhood opportunities and defined by quality schools, parks so that children can play, playgrounds, clean air, and access to healthy food, health care, and housing. The most important time in a child's life is between 0 and 3 years old. And this is why we need to focus on early childhood opportunities. What's happening in a child's life in 3rd grade, that child will be the same place when they graduate unless we have programs like the Frontiers, programs like the Boys and Girls Club, programs like the Outlet. We have to really look for the interventions. So Dr. Martin Luther King, he lived in an intergenerational household with his mother, his grandmother. He took piano from his mother, who actually was a graduate of Hampton University. He was a middle child. You have to watch those middle children. He was invested in his education, but more importantly, he was in an educational system that recognized his intellectual abilities. Him being the quarterback, this was a man that understood strategy. So when we look back at history, one of the challenges I have is that we start to look about these singular events. We say, oh yeah, the March on Washington. But I need us to get a little bit more granular. It was the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. Jobs and freedom. There were over 250,000 people that were there that day at that march. There were 10 demands that were given to Kennedy. There were artists like Mahalia Jackson who told Martin, tell him about the dream. That wasn't scripted. somebody interrupted and said, tell them about the dream. There were people that looked just like this room in that audience. There were Christians, there were Jewish individuals, there were Muslim individuals. There were people of all races, and that's why we have to remain together. Martin spoke out against Vietnam, so we know what he would be saying about this war that we have been witnessing. So Dr. King, out of all the professions, said medicine was the most inhumane injustice. He had observed multiple families actually die from TB. And as a Black woman, I'm more likely to die than any other ethnic or racial group from heart disease. I'm 2 times more likely to get diabetes. I'm 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. This is real. We need everybody in here to make sure they're going to the doctor. And when you look at our community health needs assessment, it says that maybe only 50% of people are going to the doctor once a year. We must be intentional. One of the things that I believe is that our Springfield, Central Illinois African American Museum is extremely important. We must continue to understand our history. So in my work, I found that there's barriers to racial justice and equity. Shame is a barrier. Shame is a barrier. Being uncomfortable can be a barrier. Ego, not able to admit they were wrong and course correct. We must own our mistakes. Justice means making it right. We must make it right. So when I come back here next year to celebrate the Frontier's 50th anniversary, my question to you is, were you a dream killer or a dream keeper? When times are hard for me, I do not allow myself to get amnesia. I reflect on my history. My history is that somebody lay in the bottom of a slave ship called Doddington so that I could be in front of this podium today. So I have learned a few things recently from Tricia Hershey. She said that rest is resistance. If we do not rest, we're not going to be sustainable. If we do not rest, we're not going to have the ability to imagine the possibilities and develop the clarity we need. Brittany Cooper introduced me to something called eloquent rage. I used to not want to be labeled an angry Black woman. After being told, you look angry, I started trying to fix my face. Now, one of the things I realize, that's a correct assessment. I am angry. I'm angry that Springfield has one of the highest segregation indexes in the United States of America. This is for you, Senator Dick Durbin. I'm angry, so you gotta stop them, that there are all these laws against diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you for saying diversity matters. So yes, the burden is heavy, and this is why we must all carry it together so that it does not break one person's back. We need to protect our minds, our bodies, and our souls. So I told you that Samira is actually at Howard University. Her first year, they started having bombing threats. And the one generation said, oh, keep going, we're used to this. But remember, Maya said, when we know better, we must do better. So Howard University, they have mental health days now. They have mental health therapies working with the students. And this is what we need to do. Because when you think about it, Dr. Martin Luther King died at the age of 39. But when they did his autopsy, they said he had a heart of a 60-year-old. Do you all remember Eric Garner? I Can't Breathe? Eric Garner's daughter died at the age of 29. Something is going on. Dr. Geronimus taught us that there's something called the weathering effect. The weathering effect is when you just get beat down and tired. So we must protect our minds, our bodies, and our spirit, because what I do in the hospital, what I do in the clinic, only matters 20%. Everything else that matters is what everybody else in this room does. It's what the housing does. It's what people who are securing food. It's people who are on foundations, making sure that people are getting resources in the right place. There are political determinants of health. There are social determinants of health. So as I come to a close, I need everybody to stand. I need you to remember that God does not choose the qualified, but He qualifies the chosen. When you're overwhelmed, I need you to stand. Don't turn your back on the truth, but stand. Don't turn your back on the story of our community, but stand. Listen and believe people when they tell you what's happening. We must embrace humanity. We are all inextricably linked. So stand in your truth, stand in your power. When I was 9 years old, I allowed somebody to push me out of my integrity. But now that I'm 52, I know how to have eloquent rage. I know how to stand. And we must all stand and refuse to ever let anyone push us out of our integrity. Thank you.